WVW Broadcast Network is pleased to present the Lopez for Liberty Report with your host, Claire Lopez. Claire has served as a member of the Citizens Commission on Benghazi and continues among the members of its successor organization, the Citizens Commission on National Security. She's formerly vice president of the Intelligence Summit. She was a career operations officer with the Central Intelligence Agency, a professor at the Center for Counterintelligence and Security Studies, and executive director of the Iran Policy Committee from 2005 to 2006. She's also served as a consultant and intelligence analyst and researcher for a variety of defense firms. Already an advisor to EMP Act America, she has also been named a member of the Congressional Task Force on National and Homeland Security. Claire has been a visiting researcher and guest lecturer on counterterrorism, national defense, and international relations at Georgetown University. She's the author of the book, The Rise of the Iran Lobby, Sharia, the Threat to America, and The Secure Freedom Strategy, a plan for victory over the global jihad. And now, here is your host, Claire Lopez.
Hello, I'm Claire Lopez, the founder and the president of Lopez Liberty, LLC. Here we are at the end of February 2020, and with the rising tensions in the Middle East and between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran, wondering what will come next, what kind of additional future aggression, belligerence will come out of that regime, what kind of potential retaliation possibly may come from that regime against the United States, against Israel, against other allies in the Middle East, elsewhere. I have put together a 12-part series on Hizballah. Hizballah, the wholly owned terror Shiite militia subsidiary of the Tehran regime. Because Hizballah is the primary, the first, the largest, the best organized, the most capable and lethal of the Iranian terror proxy militias. And so we will begin today with our very first segment of a 12-part series on Hizballah with Hizballah, Nature of the Threat. Now, what I would like to present to you is an overview of Hizballah as an Islamic jihad terror organization, as an Iranian proxy for power projection, not just regionally, but globally, and indeed right here in the United States. It is a transnational criminal organization. Hizballah deeply involved in criminality of all sorts. We'll get into that. Narco-trafficking, money laundering, other things. And then finally, we'll look at Hizballah in its own neighborhood, where it was founded, meaning in Lebanon, and what its impact has been on that region in Lebanon and more broadly around the Middle East region. Now, the most important reason that I wanted to do this series is because Hizballah is a direct threat to the national security of the United States. So is Iran. Hizballah is its tool. All right. Now, in terms of the kind of threat that Hizballah poses, it has been on the United States Department of State Foreign Terrorist Organizations list for many years, remains there. It is also designated as a terrorist organization by many of our allies, although not all, and we'll talk about some of those and the differences among them. Hizballah is a terror proxy for the Iranian regime, as we have said. And it is especially dangerous because of its jihadist ideology, its Islamic-based jihadist ideology, which, as we'll talk about, is identical to the ideology, the beliefs of the top-level leadership of the Iranian regime itself. Now, before 9/11, September 11, 2001, Hizballah had been responsible for more U.S. deaths than any other terror group on that FTO list. Now, with 9/11, and we'll talk about the involvement of Hizballah and Iran in the attacks of 9/11, with those attacks, that number shot way up, of course. Now, here are some comments from some early officials in the United States government. We're looking here at Richard Armitage. He is the former Deputy Secretary of State, Richard Armitage. And some time ago, in fact, speaking about Hizballah, he said, Hizballah is the A team and Al-Qaeda is the B team. He very clearly stated that Hizballah is a national security threat to the United States, not just our presence abroad, but here in the homeland. Certainly because of 9/11, but because of what we'll present in this series as we go forward. Here is former Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff, and he too was commenting on the deadly lethality of the Hizballah Shiite terror militia, and he said that Hizballah makes Al-Qaeda look like a minor league team. What you're looking at here is the flag on the upper right-hand corner of this particular slide. That is the flag of Hizballah. The yellow backdrop, the green with the raised arm holding a gun, a rifle, and it is a stylized, actually, rendition of the name of Allah. And let me mention right here, I think this is the place to do it as we begin, the very word, the name Hizballah in Arabic, and it's why I pronounce it this way, Hizballah, because Hizb, the first part of that, means party, Allah, God, the party of God. That is what Hizballah's name really means. And if you say it any other way, you know, we often see it rendered as Hezbollah or some other version that way, you lose that meaning, I think. So I'm always careful to pronounce it Hizballah. All right. Now, I wanted to show you this matrix that I put together on this slide here to illustrate the interconnectivity of so many jihad and criminal activities and organizations around the world. So in the upper left-hand corner, of course, we have 3 flags of nation states. The magenta and white one belongs to Qatar, which, as we know, funds a lot of terror activity around the world, particularly in the Middle East. Qatar also funds a lot of dawah activity here in the United States by its funding for think tanks, for universities, departments, and shares at universities. The green flag in that square is the flag of Saudi Arabia. And you've got the green field. Green, why? Because that is said to have been the favorite color of Muhammad, the founder of Islam. The words on the Saudi flag are the words of the Shahada. That is the statement of faith that all Muslims adhere to. There is no God but Allah, that phrase says, and Muhammad, it says, is his prophet. And underlining that phrase, of course, is the sword, meaning jihad by the sword. The final flag there in that corner is the flag of Iran. All right, upper right-hand corner, we'll see a number of logos and flags. Again, you'll see the yellow flag of Hizballah with the green imagery on it. To its left is the flag that we've also often seen used by the Islamic State, and on it, written in those white letters, again, the Shahada, the statement of faith of Islam. So you hear people saying, oh, Islamic State or ISIS, and previously its earlier name was Islamic State in Iraq and Al-Sham. Now it's, since June of 2014, simply Islamic State. It wants to emphasize with the use of this flag that it is absolutely adherent to authoritative, orthodox, mainstream Islam. The other black and white flag in this quadrant is a little different style, but it says the same thing. Again, it's the Shahada. You might call this the black flag of jihad, and it is used by different groups, but very often associated with the Islamic State. And the final logo in the bottom right-hand corner of that quadrant is the logo of the Muslim Brotherhood. And here again, you see the green field, the color green again, the circle, right? And the cross swords in which are cradled a book, the Quran, of course. And then the words at the bottom, underneath the bottom part of the circle there, actually it's a word, is wa'udu. And wa'udu is the first word of Quranic verse 860, which says, prepare or make ready your forces to the utmost of your power, including steeds of war, to strike terror into the hearts of the enemy. That is the motto. That is the logo, as you can see here, on the Muslim Brotherhood's shield or logo, as you see it here on the screen. Now, the bottom two quadrants get into the interconnectivity, if you will, of international criminal organizations. So in the bottom left-hand corner, you see a patch of Los Zetas. We'll be talking about the Mexican drug cartels. Zetas is one of those, with which, by the way, Hizballah collaborates. The other image there is an image of weapons lying on top of piles of cash to convey the money-making aspect and the violent aspect of the Mexican drug cartels and other narco-trafficking cartels with which Hizballah is involved. Finally, transnational organized crime in the bottom right-hand quadrant. You see some images of documents. So we're talking about forged documents, the documents industry, and you know, the idea that this is an integral part of the criminality of Hizballah. We'll be talking about all of those things in segments to come. Now, let's look at another image here of the interconnectivity of the global threat, of which Hizballah is a key part, a key player. Upper left-hand corner, you see the image there, the photograph there of Kim Jong-un, the ruler of North Korea. Yes, Iran collaborates directly with North Korea, and so does Hizballah. Upper right-hand corner is the shield, or the image, the symbol of the KGB. And yes, KGB or its successors, the SVR is the international branch of the Russian intelligence service. The FSB is the domestic branch of the Russian intelligence service. KGB was the parent organization, intelligence organization of Russia. And so what I want to say with this is how Hizballah interacts with, as we saw on the previous slide, nation states, subnational terror organizations, as well as different criminal organizations. And we're looking at Al-Qaeda, we're looking at Iran, we're looking at North Korea, certainly Syria, and we are looking at all sorts of criminality to include the narco-trafficking that we have talked about, other crimes we will be talking about in segments to come, and as well the kinds of things that Hizballah and these others are involved in, research and development on all the weapons of mass destruction, yes, biological, chemical, nuclear, among nuclear, EMP, at least the nation states are involved at that level. Hizballah is involved certainly with the biological and the chemical offensive agent development of the WMD. And all the things that go along with this kind of international criminality, and that is training, money laundering, weapons smuggling, and so forth. All right, let's move along here. Let's talk about Hizballah as an Iranian proxy. Now, what people may or may not realize is how Hizballah's chain of command actually goes. So, as we know, Hizballah is Lebanon-based, and the Secretary General of Hizballah today is Hassan Nasrallah. But his chain of command continues on up. It goes through the Quds Force, of which Qasem Soleimani was commander until early January of this year, 2020. Quds Force itself is a division of the IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran. And then finally, the final leader of all of this, and where the chain of command goes, is the supreme leader of Iran. Today, that is the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. since 1989. So it is important, I think, to lay out that chain of command. Hizballah, at the grassroots, let's say the ground level, engages in all sorts of activities, certainly the criminal activities, independently, or I shouldn't say independently, but certainly without the direct day-to-day supervision. But what I want to convey here is that for any kind of a major operation or even a line of activity, those commands and that authority would come directly from Iran, directly from Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. So Hizballah will do whatever the supreme leader commands. They will salute and they will do it. Even, as we will see in some occasions, when it's not completely or necessarily in Hizballah's own benefit. I'll mention right here the war in the former Syria, the war to save the Damascus regime of Bashar al-Assad. That was not really image-wise in Hizballah's benefit to pursue, and yet it did. Because why? Because the supreme leader, the Iranian supreme leader and Iranian regime commanded it to do so. And then finally, we will talk about this at much greater length, Hizballah's alliance with al-Qaeda since 1990, and certainly with Iran itself, which founded it for 35 plus years at this point. All right, the Iran-Hizballah relationship here. Let me draw your attention especially to the yellow highlighted part in the middle of this slide, to emphasize what I was saying about that chain of command going straight to the top of the Iranian regime. We abide, Hizballah wrote, this is Hizballah's political platform written in 1985, and I will read it. We abide by the orders of one single wise and just faqih. That means juridical leader, juridical in Islamic law, juridical leader, leadership represented by Wali Faqih and personified by Khomeini. In the 1980s, Khomeini, since his death in 1989, Khamenei. All right, moving along. Hizballah takes its orders from Iran. On this slide, you will see the logo images to the right on the top. That is the logo image of the IRGC, again, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and also the flag of Iran you will see on this page. So Hizballah grew out in the early 80s of local Shiite militia groups in the southern part of Lebanon. It arose out of those people who felt marginalized and ignored by the central government of Lebanon, of Beirut. But even though that is where it arose from, Hizballah has always been armed, funded, trained, backed by the Iranian regime, as we said before, through the IRGC, the Quds Force, and MOIS. Here I have MOIS meaning Ministry of Intelligence and Security. That is the intelligence service of Iran, and it indeed is a cabinet-level ministry within the Iranian government. And again, Hizballah will not act willy-nilly on major things by itself, but it will be taking those orders from the Iranian regime and the top command. Now, why is there such a synergy? Why is there such a close connection between Hizballah and Iran? Well, it's because they share the same Islamic faith, deep devotion, devout devotion to the Islamic faith, and the ideology that goes along with us. That worldview encompasses things like Islamic supremacism, the imperative to wage jihad, to impose Islam upon the entire world, the rule of Islamic law or Sharia, the spread of the revolution, the spread of the Khomeini revolution from Iran by way of jihad, and of course, Jew hatred being intrinsic to the Islamic faith. Why? Because it's in the Quran. And if it's in the Quran, who said it? Muslims believe that Allah said it. These images on this page show you the connection between Hizballah and the Iranian regime. I will point just to the middle one for the moment here on the right-hand side. And there you see a younger photo, black beard still, of Hassan Nasrallah embracing the supreme leader of Iran, that is Ali Khamenei, there with the white beard. And you will notice that Nasrallah is kissing Khamenei's sleeve. Okay, that is the mark of respect among Shiite clerics of a junior cleric to a senior cleric. That is what he's doing. He's kissing his sleeve. Please note one other thing there. Both of them are wearing the black turban. Now, when you see a black turban on fighters in the field, jihadi fighters in the field, that just means that those are really, those are bad dudes, okay? But when you see the black turban on senior clerics, Islamic clerics, and in particular, of course, Shiite Islamic clerics, that means that they are at least claiming descent, direct bloodline descent from Muhammad himself. So, as we've said, Hizballah began in Lebanon in the early 1980s, and a lot of it had to do with some of the family connections among Shiite clerics in both Lebanon there and in Iran. Intermarriage among those families is what I'm getting at here. The horrible years of the Lebanese Civil War followed, 1975 to 90. And out of all of that, Hizballah was founded, co-founded with the assistance, the backing of the Iranian regime, IRGC, Quds Force, and the Iranian Intelligence Service. The objectives were multiple. First of all, to conquer, to dominate Lebanon, politically, socially, militarily. We'll talk about all of those things. The destruction of the Jewish state of Israel, and then the expansion of that revolution further out into the world. This is a 1985 open letter and a manifesto of Hizballah, and it is a testament to how Hizballah thought about its position in Lebanon, where it knew that right at the beginning they could not establish an entire Islamic state there, but that they intended to do that gradually. And as we'll see, they have moved that along steadily over the years. Now, the political base of Hizballah indeed is in Lebanon. Today they have achieved the dominance of the political system in Lebanon, meaning the dominance of the cabinet, of the parliament, of the leadership. Michel Aoun is the president of Lebanon. He is the head of the Maronite Christian community in Lebanon, but he has been a Hizballah ally for many years, decades. Michel Aoun, the Maronite Catholic community of Lebanon, completely co-opted by Hizballah. There is a formula in the leadership of Lebanon. President will always be a Christian according to the formula. The Prime Minister will always be a Sunni Muslim, and the Speaker of the Lebanese Parliament will be a Druze. That is the formula that they have kept since the Civil War. Again, Michel Aoun, the Christian, as president of Lebanon, but completely owned, co-opted, and collaborating with Hizballah. That being said, in the political realm, in the military area, there is, of course, a Lebanese army, but it is inferior to the Hizballah army, which outstrips it in every measure of capability, armaments, weapons in Lebanon and abroad. Here is Hizballah's Secretary General, Hassan Nasrallah. Again, he is speaking back here a few years ago in 2013 and talking about Lebanon. A government in Lebanon will never, ever be formed without Hizballah, and that is what we see today happening. Now, it's not just in Lebanon or the Middle East that we have a Hizballah presence, and this is what concerns us here in the United States, probably, certainly in the West, even more than that presence of Hizballah in the Middle East. And so we know that there are Hizballah operational cells throughout the Western Hemisphere, that meaning South America, Central America, and North America, yes, right here in the United States. It is under the command, as we have said, the IRGC, the Quds Force, and they're doing all sorts of criminality, as we've mentioned, narco-trafficking, money laundering, cigarette smuggling, and with the money that they obtain, some goes back to Lebanon to fund the operation, some purchases black market high-tech gear that they otherwise would not be able to purchase. And as we will talk about in coming segments, Hizballah is conducting pre-attack casing and surveillance of targets right here in the United States of America. Here is George Tenet, the former CIA director, speaking in an open session of Congress quite some years ago, 2003. But at that time, and in open session, he was willing to say at that time that there were a dozen Hizballah cells operating throughout the United States. Now, if he was willing to say that in open session, and that is now, here we are in 2020, that is 17 years ago, what do we think is happening now? What about currently? Let's have a look. Here is Alberto Nisman. Alberto Nisman was a brave, a courageous Argentinian prosecutor. And he had been assigned by the Argentinian government to investigate the 1994 attack on the Jewish Cultural Center in Buenos Aires, Argentina. He did that. It took many years. It was a very comprehensive investigation. But when he was finished, it was not just about that bombing, which we'll look at, and which took many lives and injured many more people. But he had put together a picture of the overall Iranian and Hizballah presence throughout Latin America, and by projection on up into North America as well. He accused Iran in his 502-page indictment that was issued in May of 2013. He accused Iran of infiltrating South America, building local clandestine intelligence stations. They used their diplomatic posts, meaning embassies and consulates. They used private companies for cover positions. And of course, they used mosques and Islamic centers, which they were permitted to build as relationships developed, used them for cover positions as well. Cover positions for IRGC, Quds Force, Intelligence Service of Iran, and those organizations then conducted liaison out of those cover positions with the Hizballah cells developing all over the Western Hemisphere. Ambassador Roger Noriega, who was the U.S. ambassador to the OAS, the Organization of American States, formerly, also has testified in open congressional sessions, and he has called Hizballah a determined and a deadly enemy of the United States. He also said that Hizballah has made substantial progress in recent years, increasing its activities throughout the hemisphere. Notably, he said here, quote, unless the United States government acts, quote from Roger Noriega, Ambassador Noriega, there will be an attack on U.S. personnel, installations, or interests in the Americas. Now, let's remember, as I've alluded to this before, Iran and Hizballah have attacked the United States homeland before. I think many people may not realize this because it was not broadcast. It was not covered. The mainstream media would not touch it. The Obama administration, of course, did not want to advertise this either. But Hizballah and Iran and Al-Qaeda, yes, and Saudi Arabia too, were all involved together in orchestrating, organizing, and executing the attacks of 9/11. The chief terror official, or the top terror chieftain, if you will, of Hizballah for many years was Imad Mughniya. And if you read closely in the 9/11 Commission report, you will see reference to a top Hizballah official, or something like that, a senior Hizballah official. That's Imad Mughniya. He recruited the Saudi muscle hijackers inside of Saudi Arabia. He helped train them. He escorted them on flights around the Middle East. I have particular knowledge of some of these things because of a legal case called the Havlish Case. Havlish is the name of one of the widows of one of the pilots in 9/11. And she and other survivors, loved ones of those fallen in the 9/11 attacks came together in the early 2000s, and they approached a legal firm to please investigate the attacks of 9/11 because they did not trust the U.S. government to get to the bottom of it. I eventually joined that endeavor, not right at the beginning, but later on, as an expert witness. And you'll see here at the bottom of this slide the website where the findings of our case may be found, www.iran911case.com. And the judge in our case, Judge George Daniels, Southern District of New York in Manhattan, in New York City, at the end of the entire case, the submission of all the affidavits, which, by the way, you may find at Iran911case.com. It is the place where an affidavit that I co-authored with a friend and colleague named Dr. Bruce Teft. It's the exhibit number 6 at that website. All those exhibits, all those affidavits may be found. After Judge George Daniels, had reviewed all of those, he issued his ruling at the end of December 2011. And that ruling is at the website, and it said Iran and Hizballah were co-responsible with al-Qaeda for the attacks of 9/11.